Can you hear me now, Linda? Lindy? Are you guys able to hear me? I'm going to check my little thing. I can't believe no one told me that until just now. Lindy, give me a comment and let me know you can hear me. Okay, I muted myself because before I went live, I went to the bathroom and I didn't want to have accidentally demuted myself and then accidentally have gone live and then find that everyone was listening to me pee. That would be weird. That would be like what happened in the Supreme Court in the States once they went onto phone calls. There was a very audible flush from one of the justices during oral arguments, which is like, I guess that's what happens when you have very wise, brilliant, judicial people that are not particularly good with technology. Okay, thank you, Lindy, for post. Okay, but Chrissy didn't say anything about that. San didn't say anything about that. They're just kind of like, let's just let Adam speak in silence. We'll see how that goes for him. Okay, well, I guess I get to start over again, and hopefully, people people listen through the first 5 minutes of this conversation of silence before I go actually start talking. So what I was saying was, man, crazy time in the States. Um, and having said that, it all feels pretty consistent. Doesn't feel drastically out of alignment. Just feels kind of like a natural conclusion that we've been going towards. I don't myself give Trump a lot of credit in terms of much, but I don't really give him a lot of credit in terms of his ability to like orchestrate a master plan. He doesn't occur that way to me. He occurs more sort of like improvisational jazz. Like, okay, this is what's going on now, and how can I serve myself through this? But that being said, I still definitely don't think what's happening is right. Um, and the bottom line for me is I hope everyone's all right, and that it's a scary time, and I hope that people are doing all right. Welcome back, everyone, from the holidays. I noticed that when I go on break and then come back, I don't know if it's the Facebook algorithm or people just forget that I'm rad or something along those lines. But what I notice happens is my viewership, my audience kind of wanes a little bit during that period. When I come back, I have less people watching, less people reading my posts, less people commenting, less people sharing what I write. And that's always kind of edgy when I take time off because it implants in me this fear that it's significant that there's less people when I come back. And so then that significance has me kind of get into this, is it okay to take time off? Can I really do that? Or am I going to need, like, should I just keep pushing through so that I never lose the momentum that I've created? Which I suspect is really a common fear for most of us, is this concern that if I let off the gas, then it's all going to fall away. And, it's kind of true. If you let off the gas, you're going to lose some of your momentum. You'll keep more momentum in theory if you were able to just keep the gas down and continue going. The trouble with that is that just like cars, we don't have an infinite supply of gas. We have to stop and refuel. We have to stop and recharge. So the way my December off went was I took the first 3 weeks of December. I think I was talking about this in lives, was that I was very committed to the routine I had and to maintaining a lot of structure. And then going into the fourth, I had two last weeks. There's about 5 weeks I had off. Going into the fourth week, I noticed I was really feeling like I didn't want to do anything. I was feeling just like, man, screw all y'all. I don't want to do anything, so I'm not gonna. And so I honored that. I thought, well, that makes sense. Let's honor what's going on for me. And this is kind of why I have time off. And I removed all the structure. You could say I set aside my practice in those 2 weeks, and I let myself sleep whenever I wanted to sleep. So I'd stay up as late as I wanted, which tended to be about, maybe the latest was about 12:30, and that was a lady. But the rest of the time was probably maybe 11, maybe even 10 sometimes. I'd get up without an alarm and I wouldn't work out. I would eat whatever I wanted to eat. I'd drink whatever I'd want to drink. And then I'd wake up and start again. I played a lot of video games. For those of you that enjoy video games, the ones that I really played a lot of were I played a game called Dicey Dungeons, which I really thought was quite cool. I played a game called There Is No Game, which was a really cool concept where the idea was that you started this game and the game itself was working very hard to convince you that there was no game. There's no game here to play. Go away. And it's got like a button that says quit, and it's like click this, and then there's another button that obviously moves you forward into the game. And as you play and go deeper into this, it turns out that there's like this whole subplot where the game itself has been hacked or something, and it's trying to convince you not to. It's very interesting, and it ended up being a love story and stuff. Really inventive. So I played a lot of Dicey Dungeons, a lot of There Is No Game. I finished that one. I played a lot of Apex Legends, and was there anything else I played a lot of? I played a lot of a game called Hades as well. So I did a lot of gaming, which was very relaxing and fun. Ate a lot of sugar cookies. I learned that a Toblerone, Bay got me a Toblerone. She got each of us a Toblerone for Christmas. And I learned that one of those triangles is 170 calories. Holy fuck, that's insane. Until I started educating myself about food and what is in different types of food and how many calories I'm supposed to eat given my body weight and all of that. I just stuffed Toblerone on my face. I get it for Christmas and it lasts me maybe 3 days. And now, knowing that, I'm a lot more conscious. I've not even cracked that Toblerone because I'm like, man, I don't want to. I'm paying a lot for that mouth pleasure. And I could eat something not quite as rich that would give me almost as much mouth pleasure. Maybe I'll go that route. It's going to get eaten, but it's just like, wow, that was sobering to see that. Um, what else did I do on the holidays? I'm going to start talking about these rad topics shortly. Um, I got into mixing cocktails. I don't have a mixer yet, but one of the projects, I guess you could call it a project, I was working on over December was really how can I make a good whiskey sour? And so I got Bay to make me some simple syrup. She boiled up some water and sugar for me and started practicing with that. I got some good bourbon, and I've successfully gotten good at creating a whiskey sour, which is fantastic. So I'm achieving things. Um, and towards the end of this time off, I noticed a couple things showing up. This is kind of speaking to Bob's. Bob said, "Hey, talk about coming back after being gone. Make that one of your topics." Thank you, Bob, for that topic. So, by the way, whoever's here, put your name in the comments. Let us know that you're here, that you're watching. Hey, Jared, it's way more fun when we know who's here. So be generous, share yourself, put yourself into the space, just write your name or say hello or whatever so I can say hi back to you. I promise I won't call on you or penetratively coach you or something weird like that. So as I got closer and closer to coming back, a couple of things, hey, Andrew, a couple of things started to happen, and many of them were very familiar. First, I noticed that the part of me, this is the shadow of my passion, which tends towards obsession, compulsion, and addiction. Hey, Kristen, happy holidays. Happy New Year. Merry New Year. Hello, Sarah. Multitask it up. Wash those dishes. Hey, Nemo. Long time no see, man. Do I still pronounce your name Nemo, or is it now? It looks like Nima. Niama. I want to know how I pronounce your name. Niama. Niemo. Whatever it is. So as I got closer and closer to the end of that time, there's a part of me that is very much like well, let me give you some context. This is a metaphor for how it went in my childhood. Hey, Tommy. On Halloween, we would get to go out trick-or-treating, which is the greatest thing in the entire world because I would go out with my friends' parents who were more, shall we say, free with candy. And I'd come home with this giant fucking bag of candy, huge. Normally I'd get like half a chocolate bar, I get giant bag of candy. Hey, how do I say your name? Is it Ammon? Ammon? Hey, Jeff. Thank you, Ammon. Come home with this big bag of candy, and I would get to, hey, Jess, Niyama, got it. That's what I'm going to call you from now on. So I get this big bag of candy, and I get to eat it, and then the next morning, And sometimes not even the next morning. My parents would take away the bag of candy, and then they would sort of uh, measure it out very gradually to me. I'd get like bits and pieces over the time, and not nearly as much as I wanted. And often that candy would sit on a shelf. Amen, got it. Sit on a shelf for a year. We had those, remember those Halloween kisses? They were like molasses kind of chewy candies. Those I can still remember as a kid because I'd raid the cookie cupboard, the candy cupboard. Those stupid Halloween kisses from the last year. Good thing they're entirely sugar, so they're kind of they stay preserved well. But anyhow, the moral of this story was that I learned it's gonna get taken away. So race to eat all that candy now, get it all in. And so my shadow from my passion can be very much this way. And I can internally enact this same thing that happened as a kid. I knew come the end of my 2 weeks, I was going to take away from myself this stuff. I'm going to reimpose structure. I'm going to re-empower my practices. And so given that was going to happen, I could feel that part of me that was like, fuck it, eat more cookies, get all the cookies in, drink all the bourbon, drink all the scotch, drink all the liquor in the world, play all the video games, stay up till 2 a.m. This is the last chance. It's the last helicopter out of Saigon. And so one, I noticed that showing up. And I'm getting better and better at not listening to that voice, not making it significant that that feeling shows up, and not reacting from that feeling. So that's the first thing that was happening. It still happens a bit. It's like building a capacity at a gym. So every year I get a little bit better at choosing something other than racing to the bottom of my candy or my liquor or my video games or my whatever. The second thing that I noticed was that as we got closer to the last week, and then the last 4 days, and then the last weekend, and then the last day before I started to come back, was this fear about going back to work, fear about having to be on calls, fear about having to deal with my clients, fear about having to start the next creating clients course, all of that stuff, fear about it. And um, and that's very familiar too. And it happens to Bay and I both. When I take a month off, coming back to it tends to have it creates some anxiety. Once I've been working for a couple months, there's not, it's just routine. You're used to it. But when we take a long break away from something and then come back to it, it generates anxiety typically. This is what happens with a lot of people that want to do something, but they're scared to do it. So they like take a big swing. It creates a ton of fear, and then they pull back again. And then what pulling back again does is it has that anxiety build back up. And then they're like, I really want to do that thing, but at this point it's scary again. So then they have to take the same degree of plunge that they had to take the first time. So we're really better off if you want to do something, create some kind of commitment to an ongoing practice, a consistent practice. Every day for the next month, I'm going to go live. Every day for the next month, I'm going to write and publish something in the morning. And what that does is it frees you from the anxiety of long breaks away from something. It helps you create momentum as opposed to inertia. Or put differently, since inertia means that whatever your state of motion is, you tend to stay in that. So it helps you use inertia in service of what you're committed to, meaning you get going and then your inertia is that you'll keep going if that's what you're doing. So anyhow, bunch of fear coming back. What's it going to be like? Oh my God, do I suck? Is anyone going to want to hear me? All of that nonsense. And then the third thing was that come Monday, well, maybe along with all that stuff was a bit of a relief to come back to the I'm going to call it like the freedom of my routine, the freedom of my structure that supports me. Because what I know is that it really does support me to get up early in the morning and write and meditate. It really does support me to lift weights in the morning. It really does support me to notice what I'm eating. It requires energy. It requires effort to do that. but it also means I have way less self-loathing, and I feel really good in my body and really good about myself and all of this sort of stuff. So I simultaneously had this experience of relief and this anxiety about coming back to it. That's what it's like when I come back from a month off. It's fairly consistent. I noticed that the lead into it gets shorter and shorter. So like when I first came back, it was probably like the week leading up was like and then like 5 days, and then this time was about four, maybe 2 days. Um, it's kind of like when for a lot of people, the Sunday, and it used to be for me too. Like Sunday was really hard for me to enjoy because I mean I had to go back to work and I had all this disempowered stuff around work, and so it's that same kind of thing. Andrew, that's rad that you got this bad boy right here. That's a good ass headset. Good noise canceling, light in the ear. It's good stuff. Okay, well that's what coming back after being gone has been like. Quick update on the acknowledgement game that I've been playing. It's slow going. It'll probably be a month, if not more, before I'm like a month from now, before I'm through everyone. I put who would like to be acknowledged? Who'd like to be seen on my Facebook profile, like a post asking that, and I got about 80 people that put their hand up. I think last year I had about 50, so a sizable increase. And if you haven't put your hand up, but you'd like that, add your name to the list. It's not closed. It's not closed until I get through the bottom of that list. So you can always add yourself. You're not allowed to, if you put yourself at the top of the list, you're not allowed to also put yourself at the bottom. But I'm going through that every morning, doing about 3 to 5. And the thing about acknowledging people is it requires some generation. You got to open not you. I have to open my heart, and I have to connect with that person on the other side and then speak to them. But part of what's been amazing about that is hearing people's responses to it, getting what they've said back, and I've had people say like, "Wow, I'm crying. That was really powerful. I feel so seen. How did you do that?" And that feels really good. To give someone a gift like that purely from the act of seeing them and trusting that what I see is worth speaking to them. That's what trips us up with acknowledgement, is we're afraid to really speak what we see. We're worried it won't be good enough, or that we'll get it wrong, or that they'll take it a weird way. And that fucks up giving a gift, all of that stuff. You've probably noticed come Christmas, some of the things that make giving a gift so crappy are like, will they like this gift that I have? I'm worried about giving it to them. Or I don't know if they want a gift. And then we get all in our head like, should I give them a gift or not? Or all of these things. The best way to give a gift is I feel called to give them this gift, and then to give them that gift. And that's what we're doing. I love that you saved that audio, Andrew. That's so cool. For anyone that's like, what is he talking about when he says acknowledging people? If you go on my profile and look back to the live before this one, or I believe you can go to my website, adamquiney.com/TV. I think we've got all the lives listed there. And if not, we're updating it. I think there's a problem with the website right now. But anyhow, if you go back, you can find on that most recent call, I did about 5 acknowledgements live. So I did a version where I actually went live and then looked up these people, because I was acknowledging people I didn't have any connection with. I didn't know them. They follow me or connected to me in some way. And so I connected with them on Facebook, looked, what do I notice about this person? And then offered them acknowledgements. And a lot of those people were the people that wrote back and were like, oh my God, that was so powerful. So I really believe that one of the most powerful things we can experience as human beings is to truly be seen, to be seen beyond the layer that we're putting in front of the armor that we put in front of ourselves, and to truly see someone. So when I acknowledge someone, that's really powerful for me, not like I feel powerful, but like really moving, because I'm seeing them beyond my armor and beyond their armor. That's a potent experience. I'm going to talk briefly about conspiracy theories because I gotta, and then I'm going to get into this other juicier stuff. So there's a lot of conspiracy theories running rampant right now. The chief of which is Trump's completely baseless, nonsensical claims that the election was stolen from him. And along with that, there's like Wayfair selling children on their website right out in the light of day. And, there's a billion conspiracy theories. It's easy to find this stuff. Pizzagate was one, which was the idea that Hillary Clinton and maybe the Democratic, these theories kind of morph and change as time goes on because they're not actually attached to reality, they're attached to emotion. Hillary and the Democratic Party are engaged in some child trafficking sex ring operating out of the basement of a pizza restaurant. And so, what I want to say about this is, well, actually, the lead in to this is that the last person I had, or I'm going to say one of the people that I'd coached recently, at the end, he started talking to me about conspiracy theories and asking like, "Hey, you're a pretty smart guy. Why don't you believe this particular conspiracy theory?" And for me, what I noticed, first of all, is that they're based on emotion. They're not based on facts. And the way this you can see this is true is that they never become falsifiable. There's never a point where there's actually some evidence that we can then that then they can be like, okay, got it, I was wrong. There's always, yeah, but that piece of evidence is actually further proof that the conspiracy is running, and so it all gets folded back in. And the experience I'm often left with around all of this, it's kind of fun to explore the rabbit hole, and it's certainly engaging to feel like you are one, a crusader. There's a lot of sort of crusader energy around this. I am a crusader. I am the one person shining light into the darkness. I've certainly been that person on the other side of it. I used to be very much in the skeptical movement and was shining light, debunking these myths, and I was every bit as obnoxious, just from the other side. But it's kind of fun to be that crusader. I'm standing for justice and truth in the world. It's fun and engaging to have this idea that we can see something that the rest of the world is asleep to. You sheep, wake up, open your eyes, shout at people. So I get the engaging parts of it. The thing I notice is that it reminds me a lot of playing the video games I used to play, which were called MUDs in the early days of the internet. This was before the internet even had browsers. It was all text-based. I'm setting my age here. And MUDs were called multi-user dungeons. So you'd log into this shitty text-based interface, and it was all the whole game was text-based, and you'd type in E to go east, or N to go north, or U to go up, and then what would you do? Con, you'd write CON space, and then the monster that was in front of you, which was short for consider fighting this monster, and be like, Azrael the cat is about your level, and then you'd get into a battle with the cat, and you could cast spells and stuff like that. It was super fun for a while. But what I noticed about these games as I played them was that they were really fun, and I was really drawn into them at first. And then I'd kill Azrael the cat or Gargamel. One of the games I was playing was set in a Smurf kind of world, which is kind of funny. I'd defeat them, I'd get the loot, and now I could buy the bigger sword, which then would allow me to slay the bigger monster, which then would allow me to get the loot to buy the bigger sword. And it just went on like that forever. There's never a point at which it resolved into something. I never achieved anything. I was just perpetually playing it for the rest of my life on a treadmill, really. And I'm not opposed to a treadmill. It's just that I tend to get tired of that. And that's when I pull out, I notice that tends to be the way that, in large part, conspiracy thinking works. There's always just one more fact right around the corner that's going to blow the roof off of everything. And when that fact doesn't surface, there's just one other fact just around the corner that's going to blow the roof off of everything. And it never really resolves into anything. Having said that, if it's satisfying for someone to engage in that kind of thinking, if that provides a satisfying experience for someone, great, engage with that thinking. For me, I find that dissatisfying, and it doesn't provide me very I don't feel very compelled to pursue that for a whole variety of reasons, chief of which is that the truth, as it's written, truth in quotes, never really comes out. And so I don't find that there's a lot of value in it. That being said, it wraps a lot of people up. And, it's currently wrapped the US president up, and it's wrapped a lot of people that have stormed the Capitol up. And So it's a very powerful meme, we could call it. It's like a mimetic thing. Um, and it's a meme I choose out of. Okay, well, I've talked about conspiracy theories. Now I'm going to talk about some ontological leadership, some coaching and shiz. Let's talk about not knowing what to talk about, which is another version of writer's block, which is not knowing what to write about. What do I write about? What do I talk about? Adam, you go live every Friday. How do you know what there is to talk about? How do you write content every morning? How are you as prolific as you are? I'm just going to read what you said, Lindy. Conspiracy theorists are all verbal diarrhea and no action to fix the perceived problem. Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to give them a little bit of credit because they're a human and no human is all garbage. That's how I hold people. If we look at what happened on Wednesday, there's a fuck ton of action, right? I wouldn't say that that's particularly productive or even democratic action, but I know what you mean. I understand what you mean, and again, I think I get why it's engaging, and where I'm often left is a little bit heartbroken. I'm left saddened because I'm like, oh, you're caught in that loop, and inside the loop, it occurs real, and I seem like the crazy person. There's not much we can do beyond that, other than for me to really like understand the angst or the feeling that you're left with, and really do my best to love you and to hold a container at the same time. Look, hey, I get it. You're in this conspiracy theory, this conspiracy mindset, and it's very compelling, and you really believe you're the good guys, and it's not okay to storm the government. That's not how a democracy works. Anyhow, let's move on because that's a dumb topic. Yeah, so not knowing what to talk about. How do we create content? How do we consistently do stuff? It's the practice. Practice is what sets us free. So people are prone to what we want to do is we want to do it right. We want to do the live right. We want to publish the writing that is right. It would be a good post if you wanted. I think I might have made one of these once. I'm pretty sure I did use this title, Writing with a W versus Writing with an RIGHT. For the most part, what we're trying to do is writing. We're trying to do it right. And it's important to understand that in the domain of creative expression, in the domain of art, which is what your expression as a human being is, your expression as a human being is your art. No matter what, whatever you're up to, I assert that's your art. There's skill to art. It doesn't mean that an artist, like a painter, just hurls paint at a canvas and that's the end of the day. Well, some people do that and that's their flavor of art. But like the act of expressing ourselves creatively really comes more from a willingness to be in a practice, to commit to doing it over and over and over again, regardless of how we feel in the moment, regardless of whether we feel inspired, regardless of whether there's a good idea or not. In the early days of being a writer, hello, a yubba yub, M, what's your first name, M? How do I know? And hello from Riverside. Where is Riverside? Is that California? Riverdale, that's Archie. River City Ransom, that was a Nintendo game I used to like a lot. Pretty sweet Nintendo game. Tell me where Riverside is, and thank you for that comment. In the early days of my writing, what was I trying to do? I lost my train of thought because I got distracted by Riverside. Let me just recapture it. In the early days of writing, I was very concerned with capturing the good ideas as they came. Oh, hey, Mark. Really, really, really concerned with capturing the good ideas. So I'd like almost obsessively, I'd be biking out for a bike ride and an idea would come. Think a lot when you're riding because all you've got is music and the beautiful scenery. It's a great way to come up with ideas. And so I'd be riding and I'd stop my bike and create a voice memo. Oh, make sure that I write about blah. I had a very big system in place to make sure an idea never slipped through the cracks. And the reason for that was because I wanted to make sure that I I never missed the ideas that I had. And the reason for that was because I related to, well, I was taking this approach that writing was about writing the right thing. So I couldn't just sit down and write. I needed the idea. And so the solution inside needing an idea, right? If there's a box that I was existing in, and the box was you can be a writer, you just need to have the ideas, then the optimum solution inside this box is capture every idea all the time. Then you'll never be left without things to write about. That's a perfectly acceptable way to write. It's not a very abundant way to write, though. And it puts us at the effect. So it's kind of, this is what most of us do. Your box can be anything. Your box could be you have to work hard to make a lot of money. And then you're going to solve for that truth. You're going to solve for having to work hard to make a lot of money. And your solution might be, I don't want to work hard, so I'm going to find ways to live my life free of needing a lot of money. Or your solution might be, well, I want a lot of money because there's a lot of stuff I want to do and an impact I want to have. So I'm going to figure out how to empower working hard. Both of those are solutions inside the box of you have to work hard to make a lot of money. So I had optimized for this box that I was living in, unbeknownst to me, but this box I was living in, that to be a good writer, I needed good, right ideas. It was fine. The system worked. I was efficient in it. It was interruptive. There was a lot of me stopping and making sure I captured. There was a lot of anxiety that what was that idea? I could, if I had an idea and let it go, I'd ruminate on it, of course, right? Because I was like, that was the good idea. And so what happened for me was I started to tackle all of this because it was getting reflected to me by my coach, because I was starting to see the limits of it. I was starting to see how this afforded me some things that existed inside the box, but there's a whole bunch of life that was outside of that box that I didn't have access to, like being fully present, or like being able to write when I didn't have my book of ideas in front of me, or. And so what I had to start practicing was practicing free of the ideas, letting go of the safety of having the book of correct ideas to write about, and instead just writing whatever was there in the morning. And at first that was really infuriating. If you were to sit down and go through my writing notes, I have writing notes back to I don't know how long, but a lot of them are nonsense. They're like me taking an email that I've printed out and just copying word for word vacation notice, comma, 19th of December to blah, 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 just literally copying out those words, or me making terrible hip hop raps, terrible rhymes, because I'm just getting into the process of writing. So it's not really about what you have to write. It's not really about what you have to say. You don't need any of that to be someone who's saying something, to be someone who's writing. What we need to do, if we're committed to being someone that goes live, is to be someone that goes live, regardless of what's present for us in the moment, regardless of how we feel. And so what that means is you sit down and you hit live, or you sit down and you start typing. As Steve Chandler puts it, our job as a writer is to darken the page. Make the white page darker. The way you darken it is you put ink on it. You type, you write, you do whatever you have to do. It doesn't matter what you're writing. Darken the page. Your job as someone who goes live is to fill the space with your voice. Fill the space with your face. Doing that forces us to confront the thing, the fear, that our attempts to perfect something are designed to protect us from. So let me say that again because it's a little wordy. The reason I was capturing all those ideas was so that I didn't have to confront a particular fear. In my case, the fear was, what if what I write sucks? What if I write something and people think it's dumb? What if so on and so forth. And so to free ourselves, to live a free life, requires going through that fear, not life hacking around it, not finding ways to avoid having to confront that fear, not orchestrating the circumstances of our life so that fear never has a hope of showing up. All of those things are about contracting from your life. That's what we're doing when we find ways to keep the fear away, at bay, or life hack, or whatever. Instead, if you show up and hit live and you don't know what to say, you're going to feel like a bozo at times. You're going to feel stupid. You might have all the viewers that you have drop off. And in doing so, you're going to have to be with that fear. And the more you be with that fear, the less potency it has. Remember, when we take time away from fear, just like me taking that month off, the fear has a chance to build itself up stronger. If you get in the practice of just hitting live, or if you get in the practice of just hitting publish, it's going to force you to confront that fear. And the more you do that, the more that fear will die down. The more that fear loses its potency. It might still be there. It's just that your relationship with it starts to change. And you start to relate to your fear showing up. It's like, oh, cool, I'm leaning into something. There's actually an edge here that I'm leaning into. I'm developing my leadership of self, because I'm leaning into the edge rather than just doing what's comfortable. Hey, Christina. Nice. I was just thinking of you the other day. I was like, I haven't seen Christina's name for a while. I hope you're well. I hope you had good holidays. So, not knowing what to talk about puts us at the effect of knowing what to talk about. I will talk provided I know what to talk about. And then what that does is it puts you at the effect. Your ability to create a particular result is at the effect of some kind of circumstance. You're knowing what to talk about. A more potent stance to take is a declaration of a particular result. I will go live every day for 30 days. That puts you at cause to go live. You are the cause of going live, regardless of how you feel. So you're actually going to be like, all right, no matter what, I'm going to do this. That brings us back to our power. That's what that does. Being at cause is less comfortable than being at the effect, because it forces you into your fear. It forces you into your discomfort. But what it does, while it's not as comfortable, is it has you be the cause and creator of everything that shows up in your life rather than the victim of your circumstances. And for those of us really committed to leadership in our lives and the lives of other people, that's the path. Lindy, you're fearful of going live, fearful of trolls, losing your train of thought, sounding silly. I feel comfortable writing content. Yeah, I was there too for a while. Like this show, I call it a show, has been going for about 3 years now. But in the early days, it was quite frightening, and I was kind of comfortable of writing, because writing I could put out into the world. That took work too, but I could put writing out into the world, and then I didn't have to be there in the moment as people wrote something back, like a comment. I could come to it later on. I could avoid looking at it for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, then come and look at it. Whereas live, I'm right here, and they can write stuff right over there, and they can say, Adam, I hate your haircut, or whatever it happens to be. I mean, they'd be mad to say that, but that is available for them. So I really get it. And given that fear's there might be something for you to create a practice around that. Assuming there is some result or impact you want to create in the world for which going live would be a path to get there. What I mean is doing something just because it's scary will certainly open something up for us. But like, I'm scared on an airplane to go and pitch to everyone on the airplane, like to be like, hey, do you want to have a coaching conversation with me? But that's not really going to create the impact. It's not, my fear of doing that is not in the way of the impact I want to have in the world. So I could lean into that fear, but I'm choosing not to lean down that particular path. It's what are we committed to? What's the fear blocking us? How do we lean into it? Andrew, you've noticed not enjoying writing at all lately. You found it much more enjoyable to do live video, found the practice of writing to be a little boring as of late, so you think it's time for a shift in perspective towards writing. Awesome, man. I get bored of writing too sometimes. There was, for the first, when I rebranded from Evergrowth, Evergrowth's still our parent company, but like sort of split Bay and I off from Evergrowth into Smartest Person in the Room and Wonderland and Co. The person I was working with at the time said, Adam, I think you should really practice writing in second person. So I was like, okay, great, I'll give that a go. Let's lean into it. And so a lot of my writing was like, you're doing this, you discover. So it's very like me speaking right to you. And that was cool for a while. And then I noticed I was getting bored of it. That particular approach was not, I just didn't want to keep doing it. And so I think around that time I might have read Get a Grip, which is kind of a good book and kind of simplistic and stupid. But what I noticed in that was that its format was like a parable. Roger is going to work, and Roger feels so let down by work. And then he meets his coach, blah, 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 Jonathan, as you've probably noticed in my own writing. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to start doing that. I'm going to start writing through that lens. And so sometimes reading and then finding a new style and then taking that on can really be that can jumpstart us and give us a new perspective. After that, for a while, I was writing poetry, I would call it, for lack of a better term. And I still think there's a book that I will write at some point, which is like leadership poetry. That's a little bit further down the road. I got enough books I'm trying to write about. So all of these things, right? One of the things that I find magical is I can get inspired in reading something or get frustrated in reading something, be like, I can do this better, and then take that on as a practice. And that gives me, now that's my path for a while. Mark, you see, you write start, middle, and end. And if you don't box it, I get lost. Yeah, I totally get that. I find my writing starts either stream of consciousness until I'm writing, and then I'm like, oh, that's the thing I'm going to write about. Like the idea comes to me because I have sat down and chosen to be a writer. So I'm in the action of writing, and then the idea comes to me. Sometimes I have a lot of other times I've kind of had a thought. I've got an idea. Like if I go to my writing notes notebook here, let's see what ideas I've had lately. Uh, Being up against your leadership. Imagine you were a child and learned along the way that you were unreliable. You were trained in that. And the third thing I've got is offering support is easier than being support, than actually following through. So those are three like seeds that are kind of there for me. Um, Sometimes I go back to those seeds and I'm like, I don't want to write about those at all. Those are not inspiring me. And other times I'm like, okay, great, let's start writing about that. And usually these days, uh, the I don't have to be so explicit because I've been writing for long enough that the idea kind of forms itself fairly succinctly. But having a start, middle, and end can be really potent, really great way to box it. Christina, that's rad that you're putting out that content, and I've been practicing the last 6 months. I love that. Let's see here. What else can we talk about? That's dope. Hmm. Andrew, you wanted to know how I go about prioritizing tasks in business. Let's talk about that. Uh, it's a kludge. It's a bit of a kludge. So sometimes I'm very organized. Other times I'm kind of messy, you could say. So the first thing is like I'm not immune to urgency. And by urgency, what I mean are like that little red thing up there on Facebook that is an alarm bell and has a red three by it presents some urgency to me. I'm like, must click this. Oh, to these people commented on my thing, or these people did that. So like I can definitely fall down that trap. I've got some emails printed out right here on my desk. These are related to some infographics that I've got my graphic designer working on. Um, Generally speaking, I have a natural knack for timing. Um, for whatever reason, it's probably, I imagine, a function of brilliance and wit. I think it's the combination of those two qualities of being. People with wit are innately tuned, they're innately agile and tuned into timing. That's part of what makes something witty, right? Sometimes the extra second pause is what makes something funny as opposed to awkward, et cetera, et cetera. So I do have a natural sense of time. You know, if you and I were on a walk and you were like, how long do you think you've been walking for? I could probably get that time within about plus or minus 2 minutes. It's just there. There's something about the way my brain is set up, the being that I am. So what that means is that I have a sense roughly of like emails that have been languishing that I really need to take on, stuff that sort of that's a little bit that's been too long, and I rely on that to some degree. Um, how else do I prioritize? I'm probably not like in a way maybe not the best coach for this because I think my prioritization is something that comes fairly, it's not been so much of a struggle for me. That's not been an area that I've sort of been like, I really need to create a breakthrough in. Um, and alongside that, I put conversations where they're a conversation in service of enrolling someone in something and then registering them in something. So like enrollment is where people want to be like, hey, can we talk about the creating clients course? Or can I talk about working with you? Or can I talk about the forge? Or, something along those lines, the intensive. Let's list all the cool things I'm doing. Yes. And then we talk and they get very inspired and they're like, oh my God, this sounds like really what I want. One of the things I know is that that's the point where they're enrolled. And then on the other side of that is them registering. Registering is when they pay and they've scheduled this in their calendar. The longer the gap between enrollment and them registering, enrollment fades over time because getting enrolled in something means that you see possibility for yourself that was not predictable. Enrollment means like in that conversation you and I have, you can see like, holy crap, if I were to say yes to this, I might be able to do that and that might be possible. And I could also achieve that. And then what happens is you're going to leave that conversation and the world you've created around you will slowly close the doors on that possibility because the possibility exists outside of what is currently predictable for you. So your environment naturally is going to slowly, rapidly kill your access to that possibility. So the longer we wait from you getting enrolled in something, from you seeing what's possible for yourself, to you making the payment, the less likely you're going to be able to get over the hill of making that payment, especially if it's an edgy move for you. And so when I sense someone's enrolled in something, especially if I'm enrolled with them, that is something I often prioritize. I often prioritize when people reach out for a conversation because that is a really courageous thing to do. People actually like saying, "Hey, could I have a conversation with you?" That takes a lot of vulnerability because I know that doing that means like, what are they going to show me? What is this guy going to point to? Is this guy going to be mean? Is he going to slap me across the head and make me account for everything I'm doing that I'm bad at in my life? Or like maybe it's not even sort of along those lines. Maybe it's more just like, I'm scared to see what might be available. And what if I get really inspired, but then like I can't do it? And oh my, so there's all of these things. And remember, the more possibility gets present, the more fear shows up because possibility exists in the land of the unknown. And that's also where fear operates. So the more someone is enrolled, the more fear will show up at the same time. So anytime someone is willing to is sort of reaching out and saying, "Hey, can we have a conversation?" I prioritize getting in touch with them, sort of holding them so that they've got some support, even just in the vulnerability of someone reaching out to them. Third, I put all of my clients on a high priority. So anytime I get an email or a message from a client, I usually read that within the first 5 minutes of me noticing it in whatever inbox that's in. And it doesn't mean I respond instantly, but I put my attention on it straight away. Whereas if I get like a message from Instagram or LinkedIn or an email from my graphic designer or from my assistant or something like that, those are lower priority. It doesn't mean I don't check in with them. I probably give them a glance, but then I kind of, okay, great, understood what I'm going to need to do there. I'm mentally sort of like 3 days or so, I got to do that. And then I get back to whatever I'm doing. Anything else that I put a high priority on? Those are the main things. So that gives you a sense, Andrew. Hopefully that's helpful. Let me know like, if any questions that sort of leads you, like how the fuck do you manage to have anything work for you if you're not managing it with a list? Two of the things I do, I've got a digital to-do list right here. I use an app called Todoist, and then I've got a stand for an iPad right there. It's not on right now, but typically it's always on and it just shows my to-do list so that I can look across and then I can bring it up on my computer and edit it because I don't like editing on an iPad. I don't like pulling that off. So I can edit it on my computer and then hide it and then it just sits here kind of like a second screen. And the other thing that I'll do is when I'm not when I'm sort of unwilling to empower that, I make lists. So anytime I notice I'm starting to feel overwhelmed, this is my book of like to do. That's Captain America. Where are you when we need you, Captain America? Come on, man. So all that I do here, buy cigars for Tofino. I must have been going away to my brother's stag, maybe? Anyhow, all that I do here is when I feel myself overwhelmed, I sit down and I write out everything that I think I need to do. And all that does is it takes it out of the realm of the infinite, which is the mind, and it puts it into the realm of the finite, which is the paper. I might not even necessarily check off everything on the list, but it gives me a place to visually look at what I have to do as opposed to just trying to organize it all in my head. And I find that soothing, relaxing, and gives me sort of a bit of opportunity to take some breath. Mark, you stack up your business priorities yet not allowing it to pile up. Yeah, it sounds like you batch them, basically. Like, okay, I'm going to answer all my email. I've let my emails build up. Now I'm going to go through all of those. Now I've got to go through all of these documents. Okay, I'm going to do that. Now I got to go through all that. That's a great practice. What else can I talk about? Jeff asked about radical self-care. And then I talked about doing the reps, offering support versus providing it. I'm trying to figure out. So there's been this notion for a while of radical blank, radical honesty, radical accountability, radical self-care. I notice, even looking at this title, I don't really know what that means. I think people have an opinion, and you could probably go and like look this up. Like, what does it mean to be radically honest, or what does it mean to be radically accountable? Personally, I find those terms a little heavy. There's like a burden for me of like, fuck, radical self-care. I gotta self-care the fuck out of myself. I better really care for myself, which for some people may be motivating. Let me sort of put together a few thoughts. You can hear me. I'm kind of like, oh, I'm working my way through what these words mean to me. So, and that's what I aim for on these lives. If I already know everything I'm going to talk about here, if I already have all this stuff figured out, that's going to be a boring live for me, which will create a boring live for you. Hey, thanks, Daniel. How did you do that? That's cool. That's totally me, by the way, in Scrabble. Someone's like, xylophlegmatic, and then I'm like, you. I don't want to play this game, but you're making me. Fuck you. There's the word I'm putting in. Now I'm going to go back to whatever I'm doing. It's not at all true. I try to create big words, but you know that feeling when you're just like, you're looking at all these letters and all you can see is Y-O, and there's the U on the board. And you're like, what do I have to do? Throw these out so I can see something different? Anyhow, thanks, Daniel. I appreciate that. You rule too, man. So self-care, let's look at anything, right? So like accountability, self-care. What are some other things that we collectively or generally speaking feel like we ought to be better at? These are things we feel we ought to be better at, right? Oh, I should be more accountable to myself. I should create more self-care to myself. I should be more honest with myself. I should be radically in integrity. So these are concepts around which we have a lot of charge, right? Self-care. Look how fat I am. Look how much I'm drinking. Look how much I'm doing this. Look how lazy I am. I'm going to be radically productive. And so what I find the notion of radical X tends to lead to happen is that initially they're in a space where, let's use self-care since that's what Jeff brought. People typically drawn to radical self-care are people that currently are relating to the way they are with themselves as not really taking care of themselves much. There's not a lot of self-care. They're like, I don't really love, I don't work out enough. I'm eating too much. I'm blah, 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 blah. So they're like all the way at this end of the scale. And so what they do is they take this notion of radical self-care and it's like, I'm going to turn over a new leaf, fuck it. And then they're like, hiya, Geronimo. And they go all the way to the other end of the scale, which seems like, all right, if the problem is I'm not taking care of myself enough, well, then let's dive in head first. Let's really lean into this. And for me, that's a lot like being, which distinction was that, Kristen? Just so I can know what was a good distinction. There's a little bit like being at the gym and being like, I'm going to radically lift weights and reaching for, you've been lifting 10-pound weights, but you reach for the 50-pound weights and you're like, fuck it, I'm going to do it. I often find you might be able to. You're prone to injure yourself. You're prone to sacrificing something to get those weights up there. You're prone to have poor form or to, whatever it happens to be. And in my experience, that's not how capacity is built. So the thing I often find is at play is that relating to ourselves, we tend to be pretty shit in terms of the credit we give ourselves. We don't give ourselves a lot of credit. We're like, the reason that I'm not willing to love myself, radical self-love, the reason I'm not willing to be caring enough to myself or to other people is because I'm just lazy. And you know what I need is someone to put on heavy boots and kick me in the ass. That's the thing. Radical self-care or radical whatever is often the person taking on the role of that person they're imagining needs to put on the boots and kick them in the ass. So they're like filling out that cycle. I don't know if you've ever seen the image on the internet. It's a meme. It's a really good one. It's sort of like before, I think before enlightenment maybe, or before consciousness, is a picture of someone like this with a boot on their head. And then the next picture says after consciousness or enlightenment or woke or whatever. And it's the same picture, just zoomed out, and it's the person holding the boot with their hand on their head. And so we don't relate to ourselves like, oh, the reason that the problem is that I'm just lazy. And if I could just stop being lazy, then I would care for myself exactly the way I wish I ought to be. Sort of like relating to yourself like you're a robot and you just have the wrong switch flipped. And if you could just flip that, well, then you would care for yourself. And what I find gets missed is more often than not, the thing in the way my experience of most people caring for themselves is they have a very, very weak muscle in doing so. They don't have much capacity in caring for themselves. And so the way you work with that is the same way you would build someone from 10-pound weights at the gym to 50-pound weights. So I think really, if we're going to use these words, we'll stick with that radical idea. Oh, great, Kristen. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's the other end of the scale, right? We should always be a little cautious when it's like the two ends of the pendulum swing. I say that radical self-care there's not that much radical about being like, charge, fuck it, everything's going to be different. Everyone does that. That's how we are by default. That's not very radical. I say that would be radical is like, man, I don't do any exercise. I'm going to commit for this year to like put on my walking shoes and go once around the block if nothing else. That would be radical because that would be a commitment that we are committed to keeping and that is not running to the gym and lifting 6,000-pound weights. That would be a commitment to doing something in service of ourselves and something to build our capacity a little bit. That begins the journey, and that's something sustainable. So that's the other part that I think would be truly radical, is to really give ourselves a lot more credit when we look at why we're doing what we do. I was in a conversation, kiss yourself, self-care, keep it simple, stupid. Mark, I like KISS too, but the way I call it is keep it simple, sexy. We got to keep it simple, sexy. We're not stupid here, we're sexy. I was in a conversation with someone yesterday, and they were frustrated. My experience of them was they were frustrated and very what's the word? Very judgmental of the tendencies that they had. They were they were they were like, oh, I play video games and I drink too much and I do all this and it stops me from doing what's really productive. And they were really dead set on this idea that all of that stuff was wrong. And they just needed someone to tell them to stop doing it. Then they'd stop doing it, and then they would have the life they wanted. And so I was asking them like, okay, interesting. Why do you think you're doing those things? And their answer was like, well, I think I'm just not thinking about it. I'm just unconscious. I'm just lazy. I'm just not willing to be productive. If you really listen to those reasons, hopefully you can see the same thing that I see, which is that is not giving yourself much credit. Like the way we really want to relate to every human being's tendencies and patterns with an incredible amount of reverence. Kind of like if God or spirit or space blueberry, whatever you want to choose it, but imagine if God came to you and was like, hey, I'm doing these things. You wouldn't, the default wouldn't be like, well, the problem's just that you're lazy, God. We would be more curious. We would look below, keep it simple, sexy. We would look below the surface. We would look below the short-term judgment that the problem is just that I'm busted or lazy or don't give a fuck or whatever. It's never that. We as humans are far more resourceful than we give ourselves credit for. We're far more ingenious and brilliant than we give ourselves credit for. And everything that we do, including those people that seek out abusers to get into relationship with time and time again, or those people that keep finding their way into relationships with alcoholics, or anything under the sun that you can come up with, all of that is done for a reason. There is a positive intention. They might not be conscious of it, but there is a positive intention. By positive, I don't mean if I do this, the world will be sunny. I don't mean like that kind of bubblegum positive. I mean positive in as much as there's an intention behind doing this, as opposed to I'm doing it because I don't care enough. That would be a negative intention. There is an intention behind all of these actions. It might be below the level of our awareness, which means that when we're asked, why might we be doing that? We have to get curious. We have to be willing not to stop at, I don't know, or, it's just because I'm fucking stupid. No, you're not. You're sexy. Relate to yourself as sexy, damn it. What do you think the reason would be? The reason that I can drink too much is because it provides me a degree of like freedom. Left to my own devices, I can be very controlling at times. I can be like, what would you call it? Like radically free and then radically controlling is like, that's part of one of the many spectrums that I operate along. That's passion right there. Passion, the two shadows of passion are like, fuck yeah, we're going off this waterfall and let's learn all about shampoo because that's what I'm passionate about now. And then, fuck it, I am going to not do that again because that waterfall was dangerous and I'm going to make sure that I do the right stuff and I'm going to really focus on work and blah, 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 blah. First of all, it's not sexy. And second of all, that swing when I'm over here and the like, I'm going to do the thing and I'm going to blah and blah and blah and blah, drinking or obsessing over video games, they're like a path, they're an access to freedom when I'm otherwise unwilling to give myself any of that. And if I can start to distinguish that for myself, right? I could just say, oh, it's just because I'm an addict and end the conversation there. Instead, I could be like, oh man, I'm doing this because it's giving me a sense of freedom. And that tells me that there's a lack of freedom currently. Like I'm craving a little more excitement. And maybe I actually need to lay off a bit of the control, a bit of that boot pushing down my head right now and give myself a little more space right now. And doing so means I have to confront a fear, which is, yeah, but if I let off all of this control, I'm going to go jump right off the mountain. I'm going to jump off that waterfall again. And I have to be I have to confront that fear. I have to be with that fear a little bit and be like, no, maybe not. Maybe I could let off a little bit. Maybe I could hang out 1% more away from that control and find the ability not just to jam the needle in the middle and never let it move, because that's not a breakthrough either, but have the ability to notice, what do I need right now in this moment, and to calibrate accordingly. Oh, Right now, for these first 3 weeks of December, what I need to do is move that needle right here, where there's still some practice and stuff. Oh, there's 2 weeks left, and I noticed that I want to go all the way to YOLO. I'm going to hang out over there for a while. And then, oh, great, I'm glad I did that. But now, actually, what I feel called towards, a little anxious about, a little scared, but what I feel called towards is bringing back a lot more practice. I'm going to hang out there for a while. That's where the freedom lies. When we have the ability to move all the way back and forth along the spectrums that we operate, as opposed to being here, swinging to here, and then at some point in our lives trying to fix it all by like cementing the needle right there. Ha! I've done it. I now work for the government. I only ever work 8 hours a week. My salary is guaranteed at a certain point. There is nothing that I have to worry about. I'm really bored. I wish there was more excitement, etc., etc. That's not to say that you can't have excitement and delight and all of that stuff. Mark, we're going to do it. But the government is often, the government tends to be the place that the middle needle thing can really be operated at. That a lot of people move into a government position, at least here in Canada, because it provides that middle of the road safety. I see it a lot with lawyers. In the legal career, on the one side, you've got high repute, high money, high stress, like stressful, battle-y cases. And on the other side, you've got really lawyering for a cause, working for the ACLU or the Canadian, I never know the Canadian equivalent, like the civil liberties unions, but not a lot of money. And then what people try to find is that balance, which is like either in-house lawyer at a company or government-based position, because there you have a degree of guarantee. It takes away the fear and it takes away the need for you to manage and be in ownership of your own patterns, because the company you work for imposes that on you. So there is like a safety in that. There's even a relief because you're like, oh, I don't have to manage my own stuff. But then you also never get to create the breakthrough that you wanted to create. So Mark, you say allowing others to make us feel bad. For example, I can't believe you ate without me. Let me sip and think about that. That's a good topic, Mark, for a couple of reasons. Because there's like two sides to that. So on the one side of the fence, you have this is going to be where I'm going to introduce the 3 stages of leadership as I teach. The first stage of leadership, I'm curious, actually, guys, answer this for me because I've never been able to figure this out. To me, this shows up as the left side of my screen, and this, I've moved my hand to the right side of the screen. But intuitively, as I move along a scale or a graph, I want to go from this side, this is my left hand, all the way to this side. So is this is the first one, is this choice moving from left to right for you, or is it moving from right to left? Please tell me that. And as you do, I'm going to talk about these stages of leadership. So the first stage of leadership is where everything I do is about other people. It's about other people. I'm very focused on not upsetting other people. I'm very concerned about other people's opinion of me. And at this stage of leadership, I'm also, my expectations are that other people operate the same way I do. So whatever stage of leadership we're in, we relate to other people through that stage and we expect the same. So now I got confused. Oh, this moves right to left. Okay, great. So it works the way I'm thinking it moves, right to left. Okay. So I have to reverse it. Now we're going, oh no, I've confused. Do it again. Do it again. So this is what I think would be left to right. So let me know if I am correct about this. Am I going left to right as I do this? Left to right. I got to make a note so I don't forget which. I did an experiment there. I think I'm going left to right. This, left to right. Okay, let me know if I'm correct. What a no. Well, that's not helpful, Mark. Is this going left to right? No, you're saying it's not. Okay, great. So we're actually going right to left. Okay, got it. So At the first stage of leadership, I have an expectation that you conduct. Oh, I am the opposite of what you see. Okay, great. Thank you, Christina. Great. I have an expectation that you manage and conduct yourself so that you don't upset me. If you ate without me, my expectation is you shouldn't do that because my feelings are going to be hurt when you eat without me. So you should be you should be conducting yourself accordingly. Um, and I am going to be vigilant to what you feel and feel I should do and conduct my affairs accordingly. So if I'm like, I think that Tommy might be upset if I ate before him, I will make sure I don't eat before him, no matter how hungry I am, no matter whatever, or I'll have to make some excuse. But like predominantly my thinking, the way I view the world and the way I conduct my affairs is a function of how other people feel. So that's not a bad thing. It's not wrong. It's just kind of the first stage of leadership. At this stage of leadership, people are involved in a lot of self-censorship. They don't share what is true for them because they are worried about what the other person is going to think. They don't share what's true for them because they're worried it'll hurt someone's feelings, or they're worried that it'll censor someone else, or whatever, whatever, whatever. And there's also a lot of resentment because they have an expectation that the rest of the world do the same, which is frankly an unreasonable expectation. The rest of the world is going to do whatever the rest of the world is going to do. Some of those people some of those people also be operating from the first stage of leadership. So there will be a nice match. There will be kismet. Oh, I love being around Ruth because she really cares about how I feel. And Ruth loves being around me because I really care about how she feels. And so people who operate in the first stage of leadership will gravitate towards others who operate in the first stage of leadership and judge the rest. The second stage of leadership is focused on me. It's focused on what is real for me, what's true for me, how do I feel? And consequently, I relate to the rest of the world through that same lens, meaning I no longer self-censor. People that move into the second stage of leadership become very outspoken to the point of being quite overbearing and obnoxious. But never mind that. That's because the conversation stops being, I'm going to censor myself for your comfort. It starts being, fuck your comfort. What matters is my truth. I'm going to speak my truth into the space. This meeting is boring. I don't feel I'm getting any value out of this conversation, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, I moved too much. And now my camera's like, I don't know how to focus on Adam's face. There you go. Good work, Brio. So at the second stage of leadership, my expectation and the way I operate is putting my truth into the world. I'm hungry. What matters is that I eat. And again, like in the first stage, I relate to you and have an expectation that you operate the same way. So if I went ahead and ate my food because I was hungry and you were like, hey, it would have been really nice for you to wait for me, my sort of response, either verbally or internally that I don't necessarily share because I don't think you can handle it or whatever, would be, well, that's fine, but what matters is that I felt like I should eat. And you're over there, you should not worry about, how can I say this? I'm kind of going to impose on you the same way I'm relating to the world. So at this stage, it's kind of like it's none of my business how you feel about what I did. My job is to be true to me. Your job is to be true to you. So it's okay for you over there to be upset. That's your work to take on. So at this second stage of leadership, there's still no real responsibility for my actions other than what I'm responsible to is what is true for me exclusively. This is also, there's a fuck ton of second stage leadership on online social media platforms. You can look at it, you can find it anywhere. People get into arguments. One person's like, hey, what you're saying is really shitty. And then the other person's like, I'm sorry that you took what I said to be shitty and that, blah, blah, blah. But that's none of my business. That's blah, blah, blah. That's on you. I didn't force you to do that. So the responsibility keeps getting put onto the other side. And my only job is to make sure that I'm okay. Like if someone says something to me that's shitty, then I take responsibility for the fact that I'm choosing to feel shitty based on what they said, yada, yada, yada. Is everyone following? Can anyone just give me a yeah, or I'm with you, or this is making sense? I'm getting it so far, just so I know that we're on the same page here. So that's the second stage of leadership. At this stage, at least people aren't censoring themselves. There's more truth being shared, in as much as there's more being shared, more gets put into the space. And okay, great. Thanks, Mark. So what I notice is like this tends to happen with a little bit of work. When people do a little bit of work, like maybe they go to a Tony Robbins event, or they go to maybe one landmark forum, or thanks, super helpful. I appreciate all of you for saying yes. Or maybe they get into, like, I see this a lot in the three principles community. There's a big thing. Or they might go away and do a meditation retreat and realize I've been keeping myself quiet for so long, or whatever. A little bit of work, which has them start to like I got to start to honor my truth. And what the hallmark of whether I'm doing my work is how I feel. The highest stage of my expression on the planet is how I feel. That's a big part of three principles. Sydney Banks, the founder of Three Principles, who's kind of fun to listen to talk. I liked Sydney. Very wise man, a lot of wisdom in his being. He was a Scottish welder. You can go and watch videos of him speaking, and he'll say, like, how does he say it? He says something like, "You're sort of just." I can't do a very good Scottish accent, but he's like sort of trying to get just a nice feeling. You're just trying to get that's a little more Irish, right? A nice feeling inside. And so that was really the teaching that has become a big part of where people end up, I'm going to say, stagnating in three principles, is that the measure of their freedom as a human being fully expressed is how they feel. The third stage of leadership moves beyond that. Again, not better, just different, and each stage allows for more impact. If you're keeping yourself quiet to manage all of the world and make sure you don't upset the world, there's not a lot of impact you can have. At the second stage of leadership, at least you're putting something into the world. You're no longer self-censoring, so that's going to have more impact. At the third stage of leadership, what I'm committed to and the hallmark of my fullest expression and my ability to lead is not how I feel. It's something beyond that. It's whatever I'm committed to that is greater than myself. Whatever I'm committed to that is greater than however I feel or you feel in the moment. And that becomes the thing that I check back in with when I'm looking to see, like, hey, is there something for me to be responsible for? Is there something for me to take ownership of? So at that third stage of leadership, well, let's walk through the example of the food now. So at the first stage of leadership, I sit down. Let me just see what you wrote there, Mark. Right. I can't believe you ate without me. So at the first stage of leadership, my expectation is that you would manage my feelings and that you would know somehow, perhaps, maybe because I've said it, or maybe I just expect you should sort of be attuned to me. You would know that I want you to wait for me to eat, and the fact that you didn't, I am now upset by. I am upset by how you conducted your affairs. That's the first stage of leadership. And the flip side would be I'd sit down and I would see my food and I'd see your food and I would wait for you. Because no matter what, no matter how I feel, no matter what's going on, I would wait for you because that is my expectation that other people will do for me. And I put that back there and blah, blah, blah. The second stage of leadership is maybe what I would do is I'd sit down and you're a little bit late and our food's here and mine's cooling off and I might wait a little bit because that's what I would be that's the rule I would expect someone else to do. I expect people to wait 5 minutes. Now I'm hungry, so I'm going to eat my food. And if you feel upset by that, that's your business. That's for you to take on. It's not for me to own that you're upset. I'm sorry that you feel upset. That's the stage 2 way of operating. At the stage 3 of leadership, let's say that we're talking about leadership in the context of a romantic relationship. And so in that romantic relationship, what I'm committed to is the ever growing union of myself and my partner. That is what I'm committed to at its highest. And so at that place, I sit down and I really check in and I say, fuck, I am hungry and I'm upset that the person is late. And I don't know what, and I'm going to step outside of how I feel and I'm going to ask myself, like, maybe I don't know what's going on. Maybe I'm not sure why they're late. Maybe I don't know. And maybe from there, I still might choose to eat my food, or I might choose to wait. So it's not that making the decision to do what the second stage of leadership does means you're operating from there. It's not so much about the doing, it's about who you're being underneath and what you're committed to. So at that third stage, I'm always, even though it would be so comfortable to righteously eat my food and take fries off your plate and fuck you for being late and not telling me, at the third stage, I'm transcending my own humanity. And that is how things like Gandhi having England peacefully leave India happened. That is how things like Nelson Mandela being in solitary confinement for a decade plus managed to somewhat end apartheid in South Africa. That is how these things happen from the third stage of leadership. And so that's really at the third stage of leadership, we are no longer saying stuff like, well, I'm sorry that you feel that way, but that's no business of mine. Because we're checking in to say, like, hey, if what I'm committed to is greater union in this partnership, and what I did, the impact of it was it left this person's upset, well, maybe there is something for me to check in with here. Maybe there is something for me to take ownership of, so that I can have the impact I'm committed to having, rather than just leaving it over there with you as your mess. So, let's see what replying to Mark, Jessica said, I was honoring my body and it was hungry. I didn't realize you wanted company when you ate today. Maybe next time you can let me know before the meal and we can possibly eat together if it works for both of us. Yeah, so that would be more of a third stage kind of approach, right? Like, oh, I can take responsibility. I didn't realize you wanted company. I didn't even think of that, if that's true, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of stage twos in social media. Yeah, absolutely. And Christine just says, yeah, a lot in three principles. Great concept, but the people seem to shirk responsibility for their impact. Absolutely. So that's what happens when, that's the trouble really with a lot of, we could call it like, well, pop psychology, pop self-help, all of this stuff. The highest ideal sort of becomes feeling good in a lot of ways, which locks you at the second stage. I'm not saying that feeling good is bad. I'm not saying that at the third stage of leadership you never feel good. I'm saying that you're committed to something beyond that. And in service of honoring that commitment and leading into that, there's plenty of times where you feel good. But if all you ever go for is feeling good, that is going to put the greater commitment you might have at the expense. Your ability to create the thing you say you're really committed to becomes at the effect of you feeling good. I don't feel good today. What's going to feel good is for me not to write. Even though I said I was going to commit to a practice of writing and publishing for the next 30 days, I think I'm going to take a week off. That's why in my most recent post, or one of my most recent posts, where I wrote a list of like great ways to hide, only focusing on your well-being is a great way to hide. What happens here is, so we have two ends of the spectrum again. We'll end up with people who never, CEOs, very often not willing, not responsible at all for their well-being. Lawyers too, big thing in the legal profession. They look gray and like they're rotting from the inside out, unwilling to put attention on their well-being. On the other side, you end up with people, it could be like yogic or tantra, or I see this a lot in like conscious communities that are sort of a lot more feminine energy and very little masculine energy, not a lot of balance. And in these communities, there's sort of like, well, I'm not going to do anything that would put my well-being at risk, and that becomes the sacred cow. And it's like, yeah, but you might have to if you really are committed to something greater. It doesn't mean that you go all the way to the other end of the extreme, although that's probably what you'll do because you don't have the ability to calibrate yet. What it does mean, though, is that you're willing to commit to something greater than how you feel, than you as individual. These are challenging concepts. This is not something, to be clear, that someone can just hear me speak about and be like, To the third stage. This requires practice. This requires coaching and support and having our leadership developed so that we can notice moment by moment which of these stages we're in and get supported to reconnect with that greater commitment. Get supported to notice, oh, now I was walking too far on the left side of the road. I got that correction, but now I'm walking too far on the right side of the road. That's what happens here. And so it can be quite frustrating because we're like, but yesterday you told me to go over here, and now you're telling me I'm too far. Fuck you. It's like, yeah, that's kind of the way the middle path works. Okay. Let me just see if there's anything I want to plug. The first thing I want to plug is everyone that wrote comments or suggestions for topics. So specifically Bob, Andrew, Jeff, Tom. Is there anyone else? I think those are the main ones. Thank you, all of you, for co-creating with me. I really appreciate that. If you guys are ever like, hey, how can I support you, Adam? I really love your content. I really love what you're doing in the world. How can I support you? One of the best ways is to provide topics. It's a super easy way to do it. Doesn't require too much. And if you're like, but I don't know what there is, well, then just take a look in your life and be like, what am I up against? Or where do I find myself struggling? Or where do I feel blanked and not even know where I would ask? And then just share that when I put out those posts. Really appreciate that. Super helpful. Uh, Jess, thank you. I'm really touched to read what you wrote. I'll just read it out. Jess as well. I love that. Thank you. I learned so much. I'm slowly going into stage 3, it seems, but needed to experience stage 2 to learn myself first instead of doing what others expect or what I felt they expected, as I have always done. That's a great point. By the way, Jessica or Jess, let me know. That's a great point. You can't go from stage 1 right to stage 3 because what's going to happen is at stage 1, it's like, you're going to think naturally, I'm committed to the greater good because I'm not being that selfish person at stage 2. So yes, I'm doing it. No, you're in stage 1. Stage 3 to a person in stage 1 looks like the same thing. We have to move into that second stage and only then can we go to the next. And the way the progress looks like, I like to think of it like it's on 2 axes. So stage 1 to stage 2 looks like this. Stage 2 to stage 3 to the person in stage 2, it actually kind of looks like that. So it looks like, oh my God, I'm going backwards. Now I'm putting how I feel at the effect of that other person. No way whatsoever. And so it's hard to go from stage 2 to stage 3. It can feel backwards. And the other thing is we're always in and out of these stages. We'll step into a new place and I'll go from a networking event group, whatever, of people I'm comfortable with to like a group of people that all have Wikipedia pages. And I'll be like, fuck, what do I have to say to these people? How do I be right? Oh my God, I'm back to stage 1 leadership. So it's not like you attain 3 and then you transcended. We're always moving through these in and out, back and forth. So it's not something to be like, just like being woke. You're never woke. You're in and out of being woke and asleep constantly. Anyone that tells you I'm in stage 3 or I'm woke or whatever, that's a good indication they're probably not. The most woke people are clear that often they can be totally unwoke. The people most responsible in stage 3 can often be like really clear. Yeah, I can. This is great. I'm patting myself on the back. I notice but can often recognize that they every bit can hang out in those other places as well. Thank you, Christina. I really appreciate your acknowledgement. Andrew, you are so reliable for giving me topics, and I really appreciate you for that. You're part of what you bring into the space is really, really just like a beautiful commitment and community. Really bring community. Mark, you're still asleep. Great. Keep on sleeping. I'm just making some post-hypnotic suggestions to you. And Christine, you went through those stages in your relationship with your fiance for doing it in business and fluctuate, learning to stay responsible for where that needle is. Yeah, totally. That's the challenge of all of this is just getting ever better at like feeling where we are and being able to honor where we are, but also at the same time not make it significant. And that's the beautiful dance of developing ourselves and growing as human beings. Last thing I want to plug is the Creating Clients course, which starts in Friday, Saturday, Sunday. 3 days. We have 3 days before we begin. We have 13 people this round. It starts January 11th and goes for 10 weeks. Andrew, read some of the stuff Andrew's written about it. Andrew graduated this past little while. It's an amazing course. I promise you it'll be transformational, and it's a low way to be in relationship with me. So a lot of people often come to me and are like, I really want to work with you one on one, and that's the only way to do it. And how do we make it happen? And then they find out and they're like, that's way too much money. And then that's the last I hear of them, which is okay. That's totally fine. Um, Shoot, I didn't talk about it not being about the money, but anyhow, the Creating Clients course provides a really low cost, um, low commitment way to be in partnership with me and for me to get to be in partnership with you and to get a little deeper together. We, instead of just sort of being in a conversation about these topics, we can actually get into coaching a little bit and teaching you something with a little more of a focus. So I think it's an incredible course. I love doing it, and I'm certain that you will. That's $1,000. You can go. I'll just punch in the old link right here. Boom, 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 boom. AQCC expands to that. You can check it out. You can ask me any questions if you have questions about it. And the other thing I'm going to plug is Get Lit, my podcast, which is Amazeballs. It's shorter, generally speaking, than these lives. It's about 20 minutes, and it comes out every Monday. And I talk about distinctions around leadership. So first, second, third stage leadership. There's a topic or an episode on that. Talk about like some of these qualities of being that we've discussed, like brilliance or wit or passion, and the whole gamut. There's whole tons of different conversations there, and it's super fun. Really good podcast. It's fun to do, and it's neat. Oh, awesome, Mark. I'm stoked. Brian, I love that, man. Love you, Mark. Thanks for participating. Thanks for being here. Thanks, everyone, for your engagement. Super fun today. It's great to be back. Love you guys. Have a great weekend. Bye bye.